Hey y'all, welcome back to Bowls with the Bard. My name is Cakes. I am your host. Today we are closing out our season about the problem plays by asking the question, is all well that ends well? All's well that ends well is officially a problem play, and I think it slots pretty well into both definitions. I think it can be hard to tell if it's a comedy or a tragedy, and it certainly has some problematic content in it when we think about it in 2023. To talk about the play, I have two of my nearest and dearest friends with me today. First, we have a returning guest to the podcast. She's newish old to the podcast because she has not yet been on since we have been in podcast form. She has only been on when we were wee little babies on YouTube. We have Jackie Madejski. Jackie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh my God, I would be so thrilled to introduce myself. Well, hi everyone. Long-time listener, second-time guest. I don't know, third-time guest. But my name is Jackie Madejski. I am a theater artist. I act, I sing, I dance, I do puppetry work on TikTok, and I am, of course, a Shakespeare lover and also a lover of Michaela as well. She's one of my dearest friends, and I'm so glad to be talking with you today, Cakes.
Aw, shucks, thanks. Our second guest is new to the podcast, but definitely not new to my heart. We have Karen Shantz. Karen, would you like to introduce yourself?
That was so touching. Hi, everybody. I'm Karen Shantz. I'm holding a bowl full of wine. I am living in Los Angeles and have a background as a theater artist, but since the pandemic have been focusing more on like screenwriting and been doing a lot of sketch, a lot of improv out in the Los Angeles scene, and that's where I'm at now.
Sweet. Well, I am stoked to have you both on the podcast. I know we are going to have a good time talking about this play. Yes, Jacqueline, we have a hand.
Can I explain why Karen is drinking wine out of a bowl? Can I explain why this is happening?
Do it.
Okay, so
like
so anyone who's been listening to this season, I don't know if anyone else had this problem, but I was explaining to Cakes and Karen that I was personally a little disappointed it took until the Othello episode this season to get actually everyone on the podcast was high and talking about Shakespeare. And this is called Bowls with the Bard. And Cakes, you are wonderful. You are so inclusive. You know, you want people on to talk about Shakespeare. They don't have to smoke, and that is wonderful. However, if you're not going to follow the spirit of the podcast, you have to follow the letter. And so all future guests, if you're coming on, you don't want to smoke weed or have an edible, that's totally fine. I think you should then whatever you're choosing to imbibe in, it has to be out of a bowl. And this was inspired by, I think, the Troilus and Cressida episode, because someone had a bowl of cereal, which I thought was brilliant.
Yeah, shout out to B. Thanks, B.
Shout out to B. So yeah, future guests, again, if you're not going to have weed, put it in a bowl. Just put it in a bowl.
But also make sure you have somewhere to set it down, because now I'm just holding a bowl full of wine, sipping quietly off mic.
Like you've never done that before.
All right, y'all. We are gonna get nice and litty, and then we'll talk about some all's well that ends well. All right, y'all. We are back. We are nice and lit. We have had the technical difficulties while we were getting nice and lit, but we got it all in order. All is well that ends well. Correct? Maybe. We're gonna find out. So this play does not get produced very often, and I am unconvinced that's going to change, unlike some of the other plays that we have talked about this season. And I think that has a lot to do with the consent narrative that drives kind of throughout the whole play. And so I kind of want to start discussing, like, do y'all think there's a way to flip that narrative on its head, or does this story always have to say kind of like the ends justify the means? Jackie, do you want to get us started with that?
Sure. So in my reading of this play, what I didn't really realize until I reread this the other day is, we start out at we're coming back from Bertram's father's funeral. So, he's, for all the events of this play, his father just died. So for me, that really colored a lot of his actions throughout. And I think the only way to make any of this make sense or like stomachable to a modern audience, because the bed trick, you can't do that in 2023. Like, if it's fully as it's written, where he does not know that he thinks he's sleeping with one person but he's actually sleeping with someone else, you can't do that. I can't think of anyone who would willingly watch that and be like, yes, this is a necessary narrative to have in this day and age. I think the only way this works is if you can show somehow that Bertram and Helena have some kind of amicable relationship before all of this happens, and that for whatever reason, he kind of, because of the grief of his father's death, snaps into a weird place and is like pushing away perhaps the person that he does love, but is just in such a weird place because of his father's death, and perhaps being forced to marry Helena from the king because she makes the choice, kind of usurping that traditionally masculine role. His father just died. I can see where a man might be like, I am not comfortable with this. I do not want to marry anyone right now. A woman taking that traditionally masculine role of being the person to ask the other person to marry them, even if he did love Helena before. So then, with all that being said, I think if you want to make this work in 2023, you have to stage the bed trick in such a way where it makes it clear that Bertram somehow recognizes that it's Helena that he's sleeping with and is okay with that because he loved her beforehand and is just going through kind of this grieving process. The problem is none of that is supported in the text. Like, this is all just stuff that we have to throw on it as a modern audience. And to that end, I'm like, if you can't glean any of that from the text, if there's nothing I can point to in the text, I'm like, oh, I can see where this is coming from. Then I'm like, well, then what's the fucking point? I think you can frame it in that way, because as I was talking to you, Cakes, while Karen was having technical difficulties, Bertram does say at the end of the play, I did love her once, in reference to Helena. Now, to be fair, he's saying this to the king, in a public thing, and public forum. You can definitely see how that could be played off as, oh, he's just saying the right things right now. But, you could also take that as that's a genuine thing. And at that point in the play, maybe he does believe Helena is dead. But again, this takes so much conjecture and, again, not supported directly by the text, that it's almost not worth it if you have to do all this work to make the text that's actually in there work. It doesn't seem worth it to me, which is a shame, because I think there are so many good ideas in here. And I think there is something to, I can almost see this play. It reminded me of, like, if we flip the genders of Helena and Bertram, if Bertram is like a stuck-up popular girl in an 80s movie, and Helena is like the nerdy guy with the heart of gold the whole time, and slowly over time, the popular girl falls in love with the unpopular guy, sort of thing. It's there are kind of seeds of that throughout. Unfortunately, it's, again, we just have questionable consent, which I think in 2023, I'm sure there are some people who are interested in seeing that, but I can say, at least for the three of us on this podcast right now, we're not really interested in telling those stories. What is the point of telling those stories in that day and age? So it just makes me sad, because there are some interesting ideas in here, and I love the faithfulness and the persistence of Helena. Her faithfulness, I just recently rewatched The Princess Bride, and she kind of reminds me of Wesley almost. Like, if Wesley was a girl, it's just very simply, I just love him. I just love him. And that's it for me. And I will always be constant to my one love. And I think there is something admirable in that. And also, maybe if you can explore, Bertram is acting out of grief for his father, trying to reconnect with that masculine side, and feels emasculated by Helena when she selects him after the king says, make your selection. There are so many interesting ideas. Unfortunately, Shakespeare chooses not to really explore any of that. So I forget what the original question is, but I'm sorry, but it's really, really hard to justify making any of this work because it's just not directly supported by the text. And like if we're doing Shakespeare, it's about the words, isn't it? At the end of the day, we got to go with what the words say.
Yeah, I think like throughout this season, we've definitely had many conversations about like extra textual moments that you can stage. And I think that like there are times and places for that in Shakespeare where it's like, oh, okay, this little moment is missing, or like I wish this little thing was different and I can change it with a dumb show or explain it away or whatever. But yeah, like it's such a through line in this play, and then the way that it ends makes that difficult. Karen, do you have anything you want to add
This show is over
in regards to like flipping the script on the consent narrative?
So, yeah, I think it's interesting because I agree. Helena is such a cool character for the things that she does. I mean, she's very Merida, where she's like, that one, me, I choose, right? And like, that's awesome. Yeah, the bed trick is rough. What is interesting though is that it brings up a great conversation. Like, I can imagine like this being staged at like a high school or something and having it done because it sparks that discussion. It's like an awesome lesson in consent, right? Like it's an awesome way to start the dialogue and say like, why was this like perceived as okay in Shakespeare's time, and like what have we learned since then that makes this no longer okay, which I think is really cool. Something else that I think is unfortunate is it is kind of a comedy. There are such funny moments in this where like the king is like this guy with his prologues, like what the heck, like I laughed out loud. Like there are such funny things in here. I had to remind myself, I was like, oh, it is a comedy, because that's right, Shakespeare tragedies, everyone dies, comedies, no one died, so like no one died. I was like, oh, this is a comedy, right? Because it does feel like a tragedy, the way that like the bed trick happens and all of that. And I was thinking, I was like, is there a way to like make it like she's the man or whatever, right? Like not like she's the man, but like, is there something that you can leave the text as like come to my bed or come to my house or whatever, and they're doing a different activity, like something that still fits within the time period that's not sleeping with each other? But then you go back to Jackie's point of, well, it's about the text, right? I mean, that's why we still study Shakespeare, is because of the elevated text and because of like the beauty in his words. So I mean, you could like she's the man in such a way as you write an entirely different script that happens to be based on it, but to use the actual text is really a challenge.
Yeah, I agree. And I agree, like, the first time I read this play, I think I got what you were talking about, where it's like, oh yeah, this could be a great way to like, almost like a warning story type thing. And I think it's an interesting way of going about it, because like when we talk about consent narratives, especially in a modern context, we talk about it a lot of the times in the context of like a male pursuing a female and not taking no for an answer, and this is the opposite. And it makes me question, like, okay, if a bunch of men watched this play, would it make them deeply uncomfortable to have to watch their behavior reflected back in that way? But I don't know if it works.
I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, would it make them uncomfortable, or would they be like, I mean, like, obviously not, everyone is a different person, but like, would they necessarily see it reflected back on them? Because they might, some of them might, but some of them might not. But some women might also watch it and say like, you go girl, and others are watching it going, oh no.
No, that actually kind of reminds me of the conversation we had last week about Portia, where it's like she has these amazing qualities at the beginning of the play that make you really want to like her, and then at the end of the play she does something that you're like, fuck, that's not redeemable, is it? That's pretty shitty.
Yeah.
Something I kept asking myself, and it might have been that I missed it, but like, is Bertram's virginity ever brought up?
I don't think it is.
No.
So like, that's interesting too, because I assume no, but like, did Helena then also take Bertram's virginity? Because obviously male virginity is not discussed in the same way that female virginity is discussed. But I mean, that's also, if virginity is looked upon so, highly, literally the last monologue of the king, he's like, if you're still a virgin, I'll pay for your wedding. Let's talk later, babe. Okay. But like, only if you're still a virgin. which is gross. Like if Helena's also taking Bertram's virginity, it's like that's a whole other can of worms, right? Is she also taking this like really important quote unquote thing that was regarded so highly in society
That's
from
really
this guy
interesting.
without consent?
I hadn't even thought about that, but that's a really good point because I think we can also presume Helena's probably a virgin as well, and Diana, who he's trying to sleep with in that moment, I believe it's mentioned a lot that she is also a virgin too. So it's just all these virgins trying to take advantage of each other. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. That's a really interesting layer to it because especially back in the day, for women, virginity is this thing you have to protect so much. I mean, they talk about it so much with Diana, and she's like, I don't want to give it up to this guy. But it's not mentioned with like the same intensity with Bertram, or the same weight is given to it as it would with Diana or Helena. The thing that I keep coming back to with this play is I think it's so interesting because I feel like Helena's actions, again, this reminds me of like an 80s teen comedy. If Helena was a dude, I think we would be seeing this play produced a lot more because it's, oh, this guy was so persistent and Helena's a dude. He healed the King of France, was so constant in his love. And then she came around, this high class lady came around and saw her for who he was and fell in love with her. But I feel like because it's a woman, we're like, people are really uncomfortable with that. This is not me condoning the bed trick by any means, but I do feel like if Helena was a man in this, and this was about a man's relentless pursuit of a woman that he knew was his true love, I feel like it would be a play that was more historically, I think, because I think even historically this play wasn't produced all that much. Like it's not one of the big Shakespeare ones. I feel like this play would have gotten a lot more attention, and there'd probably still be companies doing it to this day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I think another thing about it that like stood out to me last night as I was watching it was I was like, even as a person who like indulges in tons of Shakespeare, I am still very much the kind of person who needs that like first 5 or 10 minutes to feel out like, okay, how challenging is this language? Like, how hard is it going to be for me to understand this throughout the next 2.5 hours?
Yeah.
And with this one, I was like, oh, this is easy. Like this is very easy to understand.
Very accessible.
Makes it even more of a bummer that it's like, this plot is so tangly. Like, yeah. And kind of getting to another point that you guys are making, like, Helena's cool as fuck.
I really like her.
Cool as fuck.
I like her.
There's something so grotesque about the fact that the bed trick is performed off stage.
Yes.
And we can't see it. So we cannot control it. I was thinking about, I can't think of his dang name. I only watched the show 700 times. In Cymbeline, the guy who hides in the freaking box. Giacomo. Thank you. Yeah, when Giacomo's, but it can be such a funny scene because you can like really play it up. So you're like, oh, that's weird that a man hid in a box in a woman's bedroom, but it's kind of funny. Like the fact that we can't see it and the fact that we can't control it. I'm sorry, I ignored the fact that Helena was a badass, Cakes, when you said that. But like, because she is such a badass. Like I've seen that monologue, like, here I'm kneeling before you, like, I love your son. I've seen it performed. So I don't know. I feel like women a lot of times are just like, I'm going to perform Shakespeare. And I mean, this is all Shakespeare, but like they're performing it very like, but like to me, she's like set, like a little gushy and a little like weak and a little meek. And she's like the opposite. She's like, I know what's wrong with the king and I'm going to go fix him. And then also I'm going to pick my husband. And then also I'm going to steal his ring. Come at me. Like, she's so cool. And pretty funny. She can talk about her virginity with fucking what's his name and just go back and forth like tit for tat with him. I don't know names, guys. For tit for tat with him and just be like, oh, virginity? Never heard of it. Like, she's so cool. She's awesome.
Yeah, she is. She also has like this amazing exchange with the king where like the language things that are going on, like the rhetorical things that are going on, he will like step up his game, and the second he does, she meets him right at his level, and like you can just tell like this woman who has no business doing so is like throwing the king off and making him question everything that he knows. And I feel like we literally don't see, especially a low-class female character doing something like that in the canon ever.
Yeah.
Like, it's so cool to see her doing something like that. And so, yeah, I think it is, I agree. It feels like highway robbery that that element of the show is not on stage, so we can't see it. And Jackie, it makes me want to see what you just talked about. Like, I want to see the moment where Bertram is like, this isn't who I thought it was. I'm cool with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we could have that scene with the language of Shakespeare. Like, Shakespeare could have him do a direct address to the audience. I can picture it, him lifting up the sheet and being like, oh, I know what's going on here, but gonna do it anyway. And that's all we need, and he didn't include it.
He didn't do it. Does this make Helena the first Shakespearean girl boss? Because like with all like I just had this thought. It's like, okay, we're rooting for her like up through Act 3, and then she gaslight gatekeeps and girl bosses.
Is she sliding into your DMs with her like tinctures? Like,
yes!
Hey girl.
Oh my god. Helena is an MLF.
Oh no. Lol. This is like a very funny conversation because you don't know this, but the Merchant of Venice episode that's going to drop technically next week as we're recording, but last week as this episode drops, we literally talk about Portia and the term girl boss specifically. And my friend Terry talked about how they used to have like different categories for feminism, and he would qualify her as what they used to call like a materialistic feminist. And then we started breaking down like now we have terms like intersectional feminist, and Portia's like decidedly not that. And it's interesting because I don't know if we know that about Helena. Like, I don't really know if we know how Helena uplifts or doesn't uplift other women. So like, she doesn't.
I don't.
I will say, like, she seems to have good rapport with like the widow and Diana. Now, to be fair, this furthers her own nefarious deeds. Like, I think she's very self-serving in that. But she does, like, I mean, Diana doesn't want to sleep with Bertram. So it's like, you know, they're both kind of helping each other out. But again, I mean, they're not doing great things. And the widow's also like, please don't let my daughter not be a virgin. She's not married yet. Yeah, it's all very self-serving. You know, it goes back to the girl boss narrative. And again, I just really think if Helena was a dude, we'd all be like, yeah, this is what you got to do. I feel like this could easily be like, this is toxic masculinity. You know, someone said no, they don't want to marry you, but yet you kept pursuing and pursuing and pursuing. But because it's a woman, I feel like we can easily point that out and be like, oh, this is weird and this makes us feel bad. But I feel like even to this day, you know, we teach our boys to be like, no, you know, you got to keep pursuing the person that you want. You know, you just got to be persistent. Like, that's okay romantically from men. From women, we get labeled as like, oh, we're crazy and clingy. And it's not an admirable trait in women to be that persistent and constant with I know what I want with that. I forget where I was going with this, but you know.
But it does make me wonder, like, one of the questions that I didn't end up perfectly formulating, but that like I kind of tossed out to y'all, was the idea that like almost all the supporting characters in this play are like, yeah, go Helena, you go get your man, even though the man is like specifically saying to those people who are cheering her on, like, I don't want this. And that feels so uncomfortable for me when I like read it and when I watch it. And I do wonder if I would feel the same way. I mean, I think I would, like, knowing everything I know about consent now, but I do wonder if like it wouldn't stand out to the average person as much.
It is very 80s teen comedy. I mean, it begs the question, because Shakespeare has definitely written like men pursuing women in that manner, and then they get the girl in the end, whatever.
And everybody's fine with it.
It begs the question of why he made this character a woman.
And she doesn't cross-dress at all. Like, she is solidly a woman throughout.
Correct.
She never once cross-dresses, and she's like, no, I am a woman doing this. I'm going to go heal the king, like, as a woman. I don't have to disguise myself. I am the daughter of this physician, and I will heal him, and I will choose my husband, which I think is super empowering, because like Portia dresses up as a man to go and lawyer and whatever. And I think it's super cool. Helena is a woman the entire time.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting too that like for the longest time when I used to think of the pants role plays, I would put this on the list and then I'd have to be like, no, it's not.
She doesn't.
It's not. She doesn't.
No, she's just a woman.
And you're right. Like, we don't see a woman like go out into society and have agency without dressing up like a man or without being basically like royalty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So interesting.
Oh, Helena, why would you do this to us? Shakespeare, why?
It begs the question, like, aside from a moment of like staging like the bed trick potentially moment, like, is there a way to salvage her at the end aside?
What's so interesting is, again, she's doing what Bertram's doing. Like, how hard did Bertram pursue Diana? And he's like, come on, baby, let's do it. And then Helena was doing the same thing. And so when Helena gives him a taste of her own medicine, suddenly we're like, ugh, yuck. Where, like, if Bertram had succeeded, would we be like, yuck? It's kind of the same question we've been asking, right? Like, is it because she's a woman? It's not. For us, we understand consent, whatever, but like in the general like scope of society. And yeah, you almost feel like, no, she's justified because this is what he was going to do to Diana, essentially. And she's saying, rather than doing it to Diana, psych, like, here you go. Me. This is what you were doing the whole time. Sorry.
Which does feel like a slightly less icky the ends justify the means, but like still not great.
Because it's still hard to make that clear with the text, like he was going to do this to Diana. You know what I mean? Because like we can all sit here and say that and make that connection, but it's just not explicit in the text, and we don't get to. And I don't think Helena and Bertram ever actually have like a direct scene together, too, which makes it hard to establish any kind of relationship throughout the play at all. And so they don't have, that I can think of, have a direct scene together. Like, there's no Benedict and Beatrice moment. Like, Helena's Benedict and Beatrice moment is with Parolles at the beginning of the play. Like, if we just had something like that with Helena and Bertram, I think that would make so much more of this stomachable. We could be like, oh, okay, that's their relationship, at least at certain points during the play. We can make, and then it's like, okay, now it grows from there. But we're seeing their relationship through other people, through their separate lenses. So how do you get a clear picture on what either of them actually wants when they're together?
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I also wish that the end there was some amount of time for her to be able to show remorse, maybe, like any sort of understanding that like getting pregnant that way is not appropriate.
Well, it also, I mean, she literally fulfilled Bertram's letter, right? You know, get the ring, get pregnant. And she said, done.
She said, bet, I got it.
I wonder, I mean, I'm looking at that scene, right? Like, I'm wondering, Bertram's delivery of the line, right? Like, if she, my liege, can make me know this clearly, I'll love her dearly, ever, ever dearly. Like, is that line sincere? You know?
Yeah.
It's almost like he's eating crow a little. I mean, he could, it depends on the delivery of the line. It depends on, I haven't analyzed the text enough. But if he's like, I did say that, I did.
So she got me. She got me, guys.
She's smarter than she looks, To
quote Ginger Minge walking off of All Stars 2, they got me, gal. They got me, gal.
A reference I definitely understand.
Of course, our token straight. We love you, Karen.
Stop it.
I just had this is my high moment where I had a point that I was going to make and it has butterflied out the window.
It'll come back. I have no doubt.
It probably won't.
Well,
it generally does not. That's okay. That's why we love the High podcast.
Hell yeah, man. We didn't come here for coherent thoughts. We came here for people smoking and drinking things out of bowls.
That I found in the back of my fridge.
Nice.
Oh, I'm trying to think. Karen,
You're
what
talking
was-
about the eating crow delivering,
Mm.
if she, my liege, can know this. Like, she got me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like this version of it would probably make Bertram more of an asshole, but there is definitely an element of like his not consenting to this relationship that is heavily based in class, that is heavily like, I can't marry her. She's not of my status. She's
Yeah.
not worthy of me. So I do wonder if there could be an element of it that's like, that's almost like a game. Like, society would not allow me to do this. Oh no, but I do kind of like her. If you can get this thing to happen, then like prove that you're worthy of me. But I don't know, because the literal king is like, hey dude, fucking marry this shit.
Right.
So
I also, so when I was reading that, because I had the same thoughts, I was like, so this is mostly based in class, up through Act 3. I'm like, this is based in class. I'm like, I think this can work if you can show like at the top of the play, maybe like they're holding hands, like you can see Helena comforting Bertram and then they go away. And so you can be like, okay, they at least have an amicable relationship, something. And, when Bertram is first refusing Helena, it's in front of all of these other lords too. Like the king brings out a bunch of other people of Bertram's class. So, even if the king sanctions it, you're still in front of a bunch of your high class friends and being told you must marry this low class woman. So if we're coming at it from just a class perspective, that's why he won't marry her. I can understand a little bit more, and maybe more can be forgiven if it's made very specifically clear Bertram has been embarrassed in front of his fellow class members, coupled with grieving for his father. He feels emasculated. He has to go off and do something masculine now, while still figuring out how he moves forward from his father's death and things like that. I think you can make a lot of that more stomachable again, and then it becomes this game. But again, this still takes a lot of conjecture on our part. And I don't know that it's entire. I'd have to go through and read it again with that in mind and see if that's still supported by the test. Because still, Bertram still says some, not kind things about Helena. He still calls, mostly referring to her class status is why he won't marry her. So that, again, it still kind of balances out, but it's still not great. He doesn't say until the end when he thinks she is dead, supposedly, that I did love her once. So it's just really hard. It's a very fine needle to thread. And I don't know how many actors would be up to that job of, one, making that very clear from Bertram, and two, not having us, the audience, think he's an asshole the entire time, or make us think that he's being taken advantage of by Helena. Because again, it's 2023, men need to consent to sexual activity too.
1,000%.
Yeah, it's interesting. It just kind of feels like in order to make one character more stomachable, you have to make the other one feel worse. And we've talked like a lot this season about how like you can't necessarily like always edit away like the worst parts of some of these characters, but like there is also something to be said about like, I don't want to watch a play about a bunch of people who aren't likable. Like if there's a level of humanity, and then there's a level of like, wow, these people are just assholes. And I think this play it can be tricky.
Counterpoint, people love Succession.
That is true.
People love the boys. People love the boys. But
like, but I got to the point I loved the boys, and then this most recent season, both Jonathan and I were like, there is not a damn person in this series worth watching anymore. I don't care. I mean, I love Daddy Butcher and will until I die, but that's just more of a personal preference for me. That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting that you bring up like the lineup scene, where she's like going down. Because again, a funny scene. Like, are the other men excited? Is she not? And again, very 80s rom-com when he writes to his mother and he's like, nah, I'm not marrying. And his mother's like, the fuck's wrong with you? Like, she's a good gal. Like what we were saying, right? If you're in like an 80s rom-com or whatever, you're like, he's a good guy. Why is she like this? Why? Like they're
Why
kind of
is she
doing
that
it, but
stuck up
making it.
bitch? Yeah.
Yeah. He's being so stuck up. She's like, she healed the king. The king said to do it. So like, I don't know why my son's doing this. Like, come on.
Huh. Yeah, it almost feels like if you're gonna do this play, you have to A, like cut it artfully, and B, like I don't know, you just gotta get like so creative.
It's a really fine fucking needle to thread where it's like, I don't know, what is the overarching message of this play? Like, what are we trying to say by putting this play on? You know, I don't know that it's exactly worth it, or that it's not said better and more eloquently by a different Shakespeare play. Because again, we can do Midsummer's Night's Dream, and as a matter of fact, we have again a very constant Helena, same name and everything.
That's true. There's lots of pursuing in that play, and it never feels quite icky because at the, in the end, everyone consents.
Well, except for Demetrius, who gets stuck under a flower potion spell for the rest of his life.
Oh, that's fair.
Yeah, at least Bertram in this one, he is, as far as we know, not magically, his consent isn't taken away.
Yes. And I think like in Midsummer, there's also like there's the potential consent narrative with Titania, but it's so easy to like be like, they have different rules in the magical world of the fairies. They play games where they fuck around with sex all the time, and that's just how it works. Like,
that's what fairies do. It's their culture.
But like, this is not
that. This is not. No, these are very clear. Like, there is no magical elements. These are just people. Again, the big disparity is class. Seems to be the true conflict that I can tell that is really supported by the text. Because it's not like Bertram ever says Helena is ugly or that like she's a bad person. He never says that. It's just class seems to be what's keeping them apart from the text, which could be so interesting to explore. But then like Shakespeare forgets about it in the rest of Act 3, 4, and 5. It's just like he's gone to war, and the only way she can get him back is through a bed trick. So it's just like, what? Yeah. No scene between the two of them where she's like, hey, maybe get over yourself. She could go and heal Bert. Like, he's in fucking war. Why didn't Shakespeare write a scene where it's like, oh, she healed him from his fucking battle wounds and nursed him back to health? Like, that's just as dramatically compelling.
Yeah, Shakespeare. What the fuck?
What the fuck? Write better.
He's like, shut the fuck up. This was popular when I was writing.
He's like, I never thought you'd be talking about my plays.
I was not
100 years later.
Never expecting to get this far, and I don't know what to do now that I'm here.
I also wonder like what was the context of the time, right? Like we know that like Shakespeare wrote a lot of gods toward the end of his time because he got that big expensive theater that had a god machine, and he was like, I'm going to use it. Like did he have an actor that played strong women well, and they were like, let's give you a strong woman to play, and she is a strong woman through and through. Yes, she tricks a guy, and like it's bad in the 21st century context, but like even still, like damn, she really did that, which is not something you see very often. So you have to wonder, like, did he have a reason? Did he have a lover at the time that he wanted to write a strong woman to say, like, look at how feminist I am? That like, it's interesting to think about the context that this was written in.
Yeah, that is a great point. He wrote this and Measure for Measure in a very close capacity.
Interesting.
And Isabella is probably the other character, like female character in the canon who might be of lower status, who like does challenge authority the way that Helena does, and somehow also ends up in a bed trick. That's very interesting. Like in the same way I'm constantly like, Shakespeare knew a Helena with consent issues. Like he must have had somebody around this time who was challenging authority in a way. I mean, it could have been Queen Elizabeth herself, but
I was gonna say, or politically, like what was happening politically.
That's very interesting.
Because I mean, we were talking about Queen Charlotte off camera, right? But like, you know, like I mean, in Queen Charlotte, right? She gets given away, and then she reclaims the narrative because she's with Mad King George. She has to be the one that kind of takes on the leadership position and like takes over for him. So you have to wonder, like, if something politically wasn't happening that Shakespeare was seeing, where a woman was taking on a traditional male role, and he decided to write about it to give a woman agency.
Hmm. And then the bed tricks were just popular, so he was like,
Right, yeah.
that's how
So
I'll
here's
end
to
this
that.
super complicated comedy.
Yeah.
And it's funny too, the whole ring scene. Dang, man, that bed trick really messes things up. Because that ring scene is funny too. Where they're like, not me. I don't know. You had it, but then I had it. And then when his like thought dead wife comes out, he's like, "Oh shit!" Like it's all funny, but
is
bad.
I mean, I guess like maybe closing question for the evening is like, do we think then, like, is there any way to recontextualize the bed trick or like flip it on its head or do it any way differently than like what we are used to seeing a bed trick be? Yeah.
I think if you can, if this can somehow turn into a game of like cat and mouse between Bertram and Helena, because if you can frame it to go back to Much Ado About Nothing, because that's my favorite Shakespeare play, but if it just sucks because again Helena and Bertram don't have any direct scenes together, but if somehow we can get the sense that they are playing with each other, if we can get the sense that there is a playfulness to this and that they like to challenge each other and this is how that is their dynamic. Bertram's like, okay, maybe Bertram this whole time has been saying to Helena offstage, yeah, I will marry you, but it didn't become real until the king was like, oh, now we're going to do this. But now, in order to save face in front of his high class friends, he's going to put these stipulations on Helena. And if she can truly overcome all of it, then, oh my God, I do truly love this woman. Like, this is deeper than I thought. If we can get that sense of like, maybe Bertram was like stringing Helena along before this. He liked her, but wasn't going to marry her, but that because of class issues. But then his hand was forced, and it's like, okay, you know what? I'm going to give her this shot. If she can do these two things, and I'm going to make this hard on her because I think she'll enjoy this. Let's see what you got. If we can get that sense of fun in there, I think it could work. But again, it's 2023. It's hard to get around the bed trick. And again, we would have to see the bed trick on stage, and that we can see Bertram being like, babe, you did it. I'm really impressed with you. You're gonna get half of this right. But then the scene at the end kind of becomes confusing. Then is like Bertram putting on a show for the king. It very artfully cut, like you said.
That's it. Like I'm looking at Act 5, Scene 3 right now just to like see if there's anything in the text that supports anything but a bed trick. But it'd be so funny if Bertram knew. His line is literally both. Oh, pardon. Like, can you imagine if he was just like both, like putting on a show for the king? Like, oh, like I don't think that works.
Yeah.
So the one line that's sticking for me, because like I was saying before, like you have to contextualize it, like you have to she's the man it, right? I keep using she's the man. Lots of things have been turned into
fine.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like you have to turn it into something completely different, because again, the text itself is like he knows himself. The Diana says he knows himself. My bed he hath defiled, and at that time he got his wife with child. Like it's a very hard to convince me that there's another thing that, because earlier I said like maybe there's another act, quote unquote, that's still within the time period that they could do off stage that's not sex. But like if he's getting someone pregnant, there's truly nothing else he could be doing.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I hate that we can't perform it because Helena is such a cool character and because there's like such an awesome spot for like a young woman to like play a really cool badass character. But I think again you have to perform it with the idea like it'd be interesting to perform it specifically for high schools. It'd be interesting to perform it specifically for young adults, and not as like an entertainment, but as a way to like begin a discussion, essentially, like as a educational theater piece, so that it's, why is this not okay even though it's a woman? Why do we watch movies where men do it and it's okay when men do it, but it's not okay? It's not okay when men do it, or it used to be. Why was it, when did it be? I was gonna say, when did it become like okay for men to do it but not okay for women to do it? Yeah, I mean, when did it become okay for men to do it and not women to do it?
The
and also
patriarchy.
Well, right, and the question that I raised earlier about like Bertram's virginity, like, does that change things? If she also took Bertram's virginity, is Bertram even a virgin? Does that change things? Like, if Bertram's not a virgin, then why are we even having this conversation about whether or not they can be quote unquote wives, being virgins or not? Because why is Bertram allowed to throw his seed to the wind without
not the seed to the wind,
just blowing every which way like a wishy?
What?
You ever blew a wishy as a kid?
Gee,
a dandelion, the like white puff ball.
Never heard anyone refer to it as a wishy. What? Just say a dandelion. What?
No, it's called a wishy. You blow it and you make a wish, and if you get all the seeds off.
I'm familiar with that part. I've never.
Is that a regionalism? I really thought everyone called them wishies.
100%.
I didn't even know they were dandelion until like much later in my life. They were wishies.
Oh my God.
I love that. Jonathan didn't know you made wishes on them until like this year when I plucked one and made a wish. Yeah.
He was like, "The fuck are you doing, woman?"
We're all learning things today.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, I agree. I think it's got to be very pointed. And I'm grateful that like the beauty of these plays is that like they're gonna be around forever, no matter what. So even if we're not doing them, like it's so cool to have a conversation about it and to study it and to be able to say shit like, well, fuck it, if we're not gonna put it up on stage, like, hey, next time you're doing Shakespeare in a scene study class and your professor is like trying to hand you basic like the balcony scene for the 30th time, like be like, okay, but like what about this Helena scene with the king? Like,
so much more fun.
So much more fun, and still a man and a woman, so who cares?
Yes. So I'm glad we had this conversation just to pluck what value there is in this play from it, because there is a lot.
There is, yeah. Very accessible text, badass female lead woman. Like if you're looking for new monologues, like look at Helena from All's Well That Ends Well. Like I love her. Thou shalt have, thou shalt have no wife, nothing in France till I have no wife. Like that is a great little monologue. I always also think of Megan Jones every time because she did that monologue during our Shakespeare class. I always think of her doing it, but it's a great little monologue. There's so many different things you could do with it. Yeah, Helena has great speeches. That great scene between the king and Helena, there's so many great little things to pluck out. Unfortunately, in the entire context of the whole play, it's very hard to stage the whole thing. Like,
correct.
It's very hard. Very, very hard. I wonder if there's something you could do where it's like a one-act version of it, where you just go through Helena healing the king and Bertram agrees, and Helena picks Bertram to marry her, and he just says yes at the end, and you just cut like Act 3, Act 4, and then it's just a one act, like
All's Well That Ends Well school version.
The All's Well That Ends Well Junior.
It's like Into the Woods Junior. I think they cut the whole second act. No one dies.
Did you know there's like a junior version of Les Mis? Like,
is there a junior version? I know there's a school version.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. I just think it's wild. Maybe I'm getting just too prudish as I get closer to 30, but no high school should be doing Les Mis. Like, number one, vocally inappropriate for any high schooler. Two, wildly inappropriate for high schoolers to be prostitutes on stage. This is nothing against sex workers. What are we having our teenagers do?
You don't think about Les Mis having prostitutes. My third grade teacher used to play that music for us when we would like be in the morning, like doing our morning.
Nice.
Right. And my mom was like, and I called it the Angry Men tape growing up. I grew up on the 10th anniversary cast.
Hell yeah, man.
Wishies and the Angry Men tape. I loved Les Mis.
It's great. Music's fun.
And
It's
my
a
mom
great-
was like, you know, they're prostitutes. Like, she told me much later in life. And I was like,
Mhm.
I guess they are, but I never
guess
thought,
so.
like, you don't think about it. I don't know.
No,
Look.
of course you do, because you're a kid.
Everything soprano and vibratory is lovely and golden and innocent and must be cherished by all, including 8-year-olds.
If you say
Correct.
so.
I didn't like the soprano parts. I liked the Angry Men parts.
Okay. Okay.
Mood.
Valid.
Anyway.
This is getting
Well,
cut. This is getting cut.
Yeah, you better believe it.
Please keep in Witchies, though. That better make it to the final edit.
Wishies is 100% staying in. That's funny as fuck.
Sorry, Karen.
That's fine.
All right, y'all. Well, I think we have come to an inconclusive conclusion, which seems to be
We sure
the
have.
theme of the season.
Yeah.
And I kind of love that. I love that we addressed these problem plays, and at the end of the season, they're still kind of a problem. I think they it's been 400 years. I think they probably always will be. But that's okay. That's wonderful, and it gives us a challenge to work through, and it's cool that it's still challenging 400 years later. So with that, thank you both so much for coming on the podcast. I love the shit out of both of you.
I love the shit out of you.
That's so funny because I also love the shit out of all of you.
Oh,
mind-boggling. Over a decade worth of friendship in this
Oh,
Zoom room.
Damn.
don't
Amazing.
say that.
Now I'm
Don't-
nauseous.
Don't
Give
say
me my
that.
shit back.
Before we go, do either of you have any funsies projects you would like to plug that are coming up in your lives? Karen, how about you?
Yes, I actually just got permission. So I'm around the writer's table of a fantasy narrative podcast.
Oh,
We are entering our final drafts. It's really exciting, and hopefully we're hoping that the final like cut, record, everything comes out in winter of 2023. But I talked to the show writer, and he said just follow the Instagram, which is Lunaris Podcast, Lunaris Podcast, all one word. And hopefully we'll post updates there. And you can follow my Instagram, and you can see, because I always have sketch shows and I always have improv shows, and I'm always posting them. And that's Karen_Shantz.
sweet. We will write that in the show notes so folks can see that there. That's really excited. I'm excited to, or
That's
exciting. I'm excited to listen to that.
That's so cool, Karen.
Too. I know. I told him I was coming on a podcast, and I was like, "Do you want me to plug our podcast?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Okay, just checking."
Fuck yeah, that's awesome. Jackie, how about you?
Yeah, you can follow me on TikTok. I do a lot of puppetry shenanigans, and I do Shakespeare with puppetry every so often. I am at Madejski, that is JDAYSKEE, on TikTok. You can follow me on Instagram too if you'd like. I post those TikToks on my story as well. I post them on YouTube as well. It's all at Madejski. And yeah, so that's where I do my puppetry stuff. I have updates for upcoming shows and other stuff that I do.
Hell
That's where you
yeah.
can find me.
Hell yeah.
I have been loving your puppetry Shakespeare rewrites. They're very fun.
Thank you. I'm very proud of them. They're very fun to do. So I'm glad you appreciate them.
Sweet.
Hell yeah.
Maybe we'll bring Cinnamon on the podcast one of these days.
Yes, we would love to
Are
have,
you there?
we would love to have a little gnar. Well, with that, season 2 of Bulls with the Bard is wrapping. There might be a bonus episode next week. Weird, I don't know. So maybe keep your eye out for that. But like, yeah, season 2's wrapping. Thanks y'all for being a part of it. that's it.
Would you,
Amazing.
Michaela,
God.
would you say that all's well that ends well?
Do we all have chills? No.
Okay. If you enjoyed today's episode, you can follow Karen, Jackie, and Bulls with the Bard at the handles either on your screen or in the description. If you haven't already, or if you're just new to Bulls with the Bard, please rate, review, and subscribe. It helps the podcast to grow. And I was not lying. You can tune in next week for a bonus episode of The Problem Plays. We will be talking about Titus Andronicus with Megan and Myrrh. Until then, bye y'all.
1,000 sighs to save. Oh, lay me where sad true lover never find my grave to weep there.